All right, hi everyone. So as Danica mentioned, I'm Jennifer, and we're going to be talking today about Data Porter for Sage 500. And this is our overview or our agenda today. So we're going to do an overview starting off with who this webinar is for, where and when not to use Data Porter. We're going to cover the Data Porter basics. We'll do a demonstration showing examples and the application itself. We're going to do tips and tricks. I'll show you a piece of our template library, and then we'll also have Q&A, which you could submit through the chat, and my contact information. So let's get started. So today's webinar, it is intended for the functional Sage 500 users. It's not considered a technical lesson. However, I invite you to reach out to me directly so we can put together something more focused for your team if you do want some kind of technical training. Data Porter is a powerful tool. It's for Sage 500 users. It allows your users to have the ability to import a large volume of transactions into Sage with the skills that they already have. So those skills being Sage and Excel. It can be used in applications where the users tend to have a heavier workload. So thinking about your transactional data, maybe invoices, GL journal entries, bank transactions, physical counts, things like that. It can be used to import master data, so your customers, your GL accounts and items, and then also data maintenance. So not everyone's aware of how to use it for data maintenance, but it does allow you to do updates to customers, maybe such as their statuses, their credit. You could do updates to names and descriptions like on your GL accounts, and we'll look at that. And then we're going to talk about using it as a template for data entry that's generated from a download, such as when data is presented in an electronic format. So maybe that's a CSV or an Excel format that needs to get into Sage. So let's talk about some limitations of the Data Porter application. As you can see in the picture, bin transfers is an example of data in grids. So when you're going to be entering data into a grid form, typically this is not a method that you can use Data Porter. It's not a supported method. It's not going to work very well. Also data behind buttons. So if you think about your master data, you might have other addresses, which is behind a button, other contacts or sales tax. And that's because you have to click the button from the master record to get into those, and Data Porter can't access clicking a button. If you do own Customizer as a module, you could work around limitations like this. So the custom fields is a great example. Usually that's also a button on the form. And we can actually use Customizer to pull those fields from that secondary menu onto the main form. And then you can use Data Porter to fill in those fields and add the data in that way. So there are ways around the button if you have Customizer. And then the last limitation that I want to point out is when you have an extremely large data set. So Data Porter does tie up the user session, and when you get into larger data sets, it does take a while to start processing it through, so you could be tying up that user session for a little bit longer. And when you get into those large data sets, you might want to consider a different utility. So in that case, you might look at maybe Data Import Manager or some kind of a custom utility. But those are the limitations. All right, so the Data Porter basics. So I wanted to pull up this screenshot of the Excel template that gets populated from Data Porter. So at the top of the screen, it shows the 3 icons that are found on the Add-ins tab. So the first icon is an arrow pointing into the grid. That's for mapping the controls. The exclamation point sends the data into Sage from the template. And then the camera icon is the one that's going to pull the record that you have populated on the screen from the form in Sage onto the Excel sheet. So I'll show you that in a little bit. Rows 1 through 5 are your free-form fields, so meaning they can be used for notes to users, calculations, or instructions. Column A11 and down are also free-form fields, and those can even be strategically used to skip over records in the import status or make record comments. Rows 6 through 10, that's the ones that are highlighted there. That's going to be your metadata. These are the fields that were identified to work with the main key. Main key is on the C8 field. And those will end up on your main or your detail tab. So we have in the screenshot, we could see the 2 main and the detail tabs. So if they're mapped, you will get it on there if they are supported. Anything that's not supported will end up on the other tab. And typically those are going to be the fields that have like the sales tax that's behind the button type fields. It can be altered, so the metadata that pops out can be altered, but that's more of a technical lesson that we can't really cover in this hour. So essentially the fields that end up on your main or your detail tab, they're not magical, but they have been identified as having the ability to import. Column B11 and down, those are highlighted green. This field should be kept blank if the record is ready to be imported, or it will be auto-filled with an X if it was previously imported, or you can manually fill it with an X if you want to skip over that record, and I'll kind of show you that. And then cells C11 through the end of the metadata and down are your data fields. So those rows represent the records, while the columns represent the fields. Okay, so the demonstration that we're going to get into. So the first demo I'm going to talk about is, or I'm going to show you, is maintain customer to create a new customer. I'm going to show you how to launch Data Porter and mapping the controls. I'll show you the tabs, the metadata, main key, the simple mapping, simple field mapping using the camera icon, and to import the data. So very basic. If you're already familiar with Data Porter, this is just going to be a review. Okay, so here I'm starting with maintain customers, and I already have a record on the screen. And so I'm going to click on the Data Porter icon. And if you don't see that icon on your screen, then you can go into your user preferences and click on the Add Data Porter icon to your screen. So once that loads, you can click on the Add-ins tab and click on that first icon to map the controls, and you'll see all the fields will populate for you. I've got 3 tabs for this particular type of record: the main, the other, and the log. And the main is where most of my work is going to be done because it has the main key, and the other contains all the unsupported fields, fields that are behind the buttons that we can't really get to. So we'll work with the main key or the main tab. And then what I want to do is I want to pull in the existing record that's on the screen, which is the RKLE 001 record. And to do that, just click on the camera icon. So that's always going to pull in that one record that you see in the form. And what I want to do is I want to use this record as a basis to create my new ones. But first I'm going to remove all of the national account fields that I don't really want for my new import. So I'll delete those from the template. And then I'll go ahead and start making my adjustments to the customer record. So anywhere that I want to create the new record, I'll update that with the RKL E002 ID in this case. Of course, that's going to be,
someone is asking, can you go over where you get the Data Porter Excel sheet from again?
So yes, absolutely. So the Data Porter Excel sheet is going to pop up when you click on the Excel looking icon. It should be on all your forms. If you don't have the icon, you can add it from user preferences. But you can also access this form by doing Alt plus F7. And that's kind of the keyboard shortcut. As I go through this particular record, I can go ahead and make changes to the name. In this case, I do want to make some changes from the record that was pulled. And in this case, I'll do the customer class because I want to make a new customer, or make my new customer with a different class. And then if you notice on the maintain customer that's showing on the Sage form, there's no address there. So I want to make sure I populate an address for my new record. So I'll put that into the address fields. And I know that some of these don't, they don't really line up with what they are on the red text. So that's part of the metadata. And again, it's more of a technical lesson. So if you want to get a more advanced lesson, just let us know and we can set something up. But in this case, we can see on the AK10, it does have the address line 1. So that was identifying that's the address field 1. So it can be a little cryptic, but a more advanced technical lesson, we could discuss that, and the metadata can be changed, so it's a little bit easier to read. And if you notice, another reason for pulling out that record is to see the formatting. So that's actually a really good reason to pull that record out using the camera. You don't want to use any parentheses in the telephone number or hyphens because that could cause a problem during the import. So once your record's ready to be imported, you can click on the exclamation point, and that's going to send it back to Sage, and it will return the import status with an X. And that tells us that the record has been imported. We should also see a record in the log saying that, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it up and just verify, and there's our new record. So that's just a simple overview of how to create a new customer, and you could always save your templates for use in the future. So just to recap that demo, you want to launch your data porter from the icon or Alt and F7 if you want to use a keyboard shortcut. You want to use the add-ins tab on the Excel template for the data porter controls. That's the 3 controls. And then you want to look for main key in cell C8 for the supported tabs or for the supported fields. Also remember you can use the camera to export the record from the Sage to the data porter standard template. And that's great for helping you format. So the next demo I want to show you guys is the update to master data. So again, this one's not as widely known, but it's such a great tool to kind of have under your belt. It really is going to help speed up changes that you have to make at like a mass level. So we're going to look at updating status, names or descriptions, and then flags, or also known as checkboxes. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so we're going to start this one off also in maintain customers. But with this one, I wanted to start off with a short list. So what I did was I went into the Explore customers and I took a subset of data, so a subset of customers. And what I wanted to do is just, and the great thing about using the BIE is that you can always export into Excel. So it's always going to go into the correct format or into the Excel format, making cutting and pasting much easier to create these. So what I do is I have that subset and I want to change the hold flag. So maybe you need to set a set of customers on hold. And to do that, we have a checkbox. So currently they're set to not on hold. So the checkbox is 0. And we want to set it to 1 so that we put them on hold. So you can easily use Excel to manipulate that data. And then you're going to see I'm going to click on the data import button, but I'm going to get an error. So what that error says is that maintain customers is not ready to accept data or the record already exists. In this case, the record already exists. We know that. We pulled it directly from Sage. So we need to tell the data porter template that we're not creating new customers, but we're updating existing. So to do that, we need to actually come back to the template, just click OK to the messages. And then when we come back to the template, we can remove the main key trigger. So this one, we just want to simply delete the word main key from there and then go ahead and try again. So that's the data porter trigger that kind of tells you whether the record exists or like if it's a new record or if it's an existing that you need to update. So now we see the import status has been set and completed. And we can see that the Explorer now shows that the customers are on hold. So maybe in a few weeks, the hold status for these customers is resolved. You can want to go back in, take that same subset, take them off of hold. All you need to do is flip that back to 0, remove the import status X, click on the import button again, and it's so quick. They're all reset. So I usually just double check in the list, rerun the Explorer customers, and now I see that they're off hold. So that's a really good way to manage a hold flag. You could also do that with statuses, all sorts of things, credit. Okay, so next we want to look at the maintain accounts. So this is from a GL perspective. So this time I'm going to pull my data by using the navigator. And if you're familiar with these lookups, you'll know that you can actually export data using the Excel icon from the lookup window. So again, trying to use the tools that are already in Sage to help you with Data Porter. So you're not doing any extra typing that you don't need to do. So what I want to do is, in this case, I want to update the descriptions of a subset of GL accounts. So I could have actually done the filter in the navigator before I exported to Excel, but I didn't. So I have the full list. I'm just going to remove the records that I don't need or that I don't want to make changes to. And I just have my small subset. So if you've used the Create Accounts utility in Sage, you'll know that that utility creates just a very generic description, and it will just concatenate the short description of each of the segments in the account. So not very pretty, doesn't look good on reports. So that's the intent with updating the descriptions here. So you can have a large set and update the descriptions fairly quickly. And then I also wanted to, if you notice in row 8, you'll see that that one has an inactive account number. And so you can actually update multiple fields at the same time. And in this case, I'm going to update that record as active at the same time as I change the description. So I'll make that change as well. And so now this is not the data porter template. Remember, I exported this from the lookup. So I need to still get it into that. I'll go ahead and come back to maintain accounts and launch the standard template using the little icon. Click on the add-ins and map the controls. So this time it maps several columns that I don't need. I'm just going to go ahead and paste the columns that I need into their respective places. So I have the status, the description, and the GL account number, and that's really all I need. So I'll just go through and remove some of these extra, or all of the other columns that I don't need, delete them. And then this time I'm going to remember that I need to remove the main key from cell C8, and I can close that other lookup. And then click on the exclamation point, and just like that, I mean, that was super quick, guys. I don't know if I've seen Sage run any quicker than that in my life. Just double checking on the lookup and verifying, and I see all my changes were made. And then also just kind of click over, and I can see that the statuses are all showing active as I expect. And that's it. So, I mean, if you're not using the Data Porter tool to do updates like this, especially simple ones, definitely give it a try because it is very fast. So that's what I've got on updating. So let's just do a recap. So again, always remove the main key from cell C8 when you're doing the update. That's going to tell Sage that it's not a new record, that you're updating an existing record. The checkboxes, those are 0 for unchecked or 1 for checked. So think maybe your credit status, whether you're checking credit for a customer, maybe that's flagged yes or no. And then remove columns that you don't need to be updated for fast processing. I mean, you guys saw how quick that was. I do see a question before I carry on. To import data, how can you be sure that all required fields are included in the data porter? So that's a great question. When you have an existing record and you use the camera icon to pull that into the template, as long as that existing record has been saved previously, you know that all the required fields are there, and then some. So you may have more than the required, but you know that at least the required fields are there. So I always start with the camera, and I think that that's the best way to go. Okay, so we're going to come into our last demo. This is the sales order demonstration. So we're going to take a look at it because there are a few prerequisites for it. The customized SO entry is one of them. And if you are not an admin user, you may not see this. So you might have to get with your administrator if you want to use sales order. So I'll show you that during the demo where that lives. And then we're going to look at the favorites tab. So this is the favorites tab that lives on the sales order entry. See, while you may not use Data Porter for the large sales order imports, I have seen it used for small e-commerce business when it's not directly integrated with Sage, or even like Amazon FBA orders. So it's probably better for smaller amounts of data since it ties up your machine. And also, when you registered for this webinar, you may have seen the blog that I wrote, and definitely you'll want to look at that blog if you plan on using sales order with Data Porter. So this is the blog here that I mentioned. It's on the RKL eSolutions website. If you have not been to our website previously, for blog information, definitely go check it out. I know I've written more than one for Data Porter. But yeah, it's definitely a great resource, and this just kind of gives you a visual of what that article looks like if you haven't seen it. So I'm going to cover everything today. So first off, I've got the sales orders and quotes with the line favorites tab open, and I'm logged in as the admin user. So right now you can see that the customize SO entry is where you want to be in order to make the required changes so that Data Porter will work with sales order. So that lives under sales order, maintenance, and then it's called customize SO entry. And it's, you don't need to own Customizer to have that. It's just a regular standard SO function. So once you open that, again, I'm logged in as the admin user. So there's different customization levels depending on how you want to set this up. If you're familiar with Customizer, you might be aware of how these work. But today I'm going to use it with the user and company. That's the most specific and the smallest customization level. So I'm using it as, or I'm setting it up for the DIM user, and the company is SOA. So it's very specific. And then what you have here is there's two tabs. There's a favorites tab and an entry grid. And if you have not played with this actual setting, I encourage you to check it out, especially if you want to change the way things look on your favorites tab, which is what we're doing today, or even on the entry grid. So if you ever wanted to move fields around in the entry grid, you can actually do that. One of those things that not everyone is aware of. So the left side of the screen in the favorites tab is going to be your available groups that you can move over to the favorites tab. And the right side is going to be the ones that you have selected. So what you have to select is the line detail. It might be a little hard to see, and the line miscellaneous. And within that, there are two numbers next to it. So line detail shows a 5, and line miscellaneous shows 3. And so what that means is that line detail has 5 fields, and line miscellaneous has 3 fields. And so we've selected 8. And you are allowed up to 14. So you could add more if you wanted to, but those are the 2 that we need on there, or the 8, essentially. So I'll switch over to the Data Import Manager user. That way you will see what that looks like in sales order entry now. So DIM user will launch enter sales order in quotes now that I'm logged in that way. And then once that launches, click on the More button, click on the line favorites, and you'll see those 8 fields now. So those are the required ones. I'll pull up a side-by-side with the standard out-of-the-box setup. So you can see there's quite a difference. Definitely your prerequisite here. So once we have that, I can go ahead and launch Data Porter. And in mine, I went ahead and I launched the Data Porter, but I'm not going to click on the add-ins this time. So what I want to do is I want to actually pull up the template. So this would be what RKL sends you, or you create it on your own. But this is going to be the SO template that works with my favorites tab. So this one is already pre-populated with some data, but I need to go ahead and make some changes so that it works in my company. And what we have is the main tab, and then we have the detail tab. So my detail tab is going to be my sales order lines. I only have one line per sales order on this example, but you could have one-to-many. There's no limitation to that. So I'll go ahead and update my sales order number. The number from the main is equal to the number on the detail so that it knows that they link together. And again, we can use our fields, our free-form fields to make comments to the user. This is great for templates. That way, whenever you have other users that open it, they kind of have instructions or some type of idea of what they need to input in the fields. Now this time when I tried to import it, it didn't, and that was actually really quick. From the template, if you try the add-ins and it doesn't do anything, you want to actually come back to the original template that opened. So I call that the control. Then what you could do is you could go back to the control, click on the add-ins, and even though there's no data in there, it's still somehow linked to the template because we open the template from here. And if you've ever worked with me on Data Porter, you've probably seen this. And so you can go back to that and click on the import button and it will start importing. So it's a little quirky, but it works. And then another thing I wanted to kind of bring to your attention is that you will still get the same validation messages that you would when you do a manual entry. And that's because you always want to think of Data Porter as a really quick typer, but it's still going to go through the validations and it's still going to have you click on the OKs or the load the defaults. But there we go. While we were talking, we got 4 imported. So I'll go ahead and pull one up just to verify. And I got an aging notification, but everything came through. And again, if we were to try to do that without the prerequisite, it would try to import it into the grid, which again is not supported. So that's the reason why we have to customize the favorites tab. And we have to make sure that tab is open when we do the import. So again, take a look at the blog if you want to try it out. This will kind of go back over exactly what we just covered, but it's a great resource to have on hand. That way you can kind of step through it. So that is the sales order. Next, I want to talk about the RKL template library. Now, this is by no means a complete list of what we have. This is just a subset of what we have. So over the years, RKL has created a large library of import templates. Usually we get similar requests from clients. So even if it's a custom request, we probably have a really good starting point. So here are just some of the examples of the templates that we've built. We have an accounts payable check reversal, debit memos with applications, vendor status changes, vouchers, accounts receivable, cash receipts, apply payments and memos, cash reversals, invoices and credit memos, and then customer updates, kind of like what we looked at. General ledger, so we have GL account updates, which we looked at. Journal entries with or without intercompany, and then recurring journals. So if you don't want to actually use the recurring journals task within Sage, you can still do that with Data Porter and have like a log of it when you keep your Data Porter sheets. Think about maybe using that for payroll. Cash management, your bank transactions. And then also inventory management. So I don't like to leave that one out because that's a pretty good one as well. IM transactions, that one can be really good when you don't have distributions. But if you do have distributions, we have written a mod for other clients to allow the data porter template to work when you have a distribution. So if that's a need that you might have, let us know, and we'll definitely be able to discuss that with you and give you a quote for that mod. Item and inventory updates. So again, kind of like what we did for the customer, maybe you have a large set of items that you need to set as inactive, or maybe if you're changing some of the data on there, you can do that quickly. And then physical counts, that one's really good because a lot of the times you're already using a grid to get that physical count. And yeah, it's really easy to make the changes and re-import those back into the physical count batch. So I really like that. Let me see, we have a question. Is there a template for copying item master from one company to a new company? So you can make, you can create your item masters. It's not necessarily a copy. So if you have the data in your data porter template already, you can use that in other companies. So as long as the defaults like item class, I'm trying to think of what the other defaults are, but item class is the one that comes to mind. As long as that item class exists, the one that you put on the template is in the other company, you can use the same template. Other than that, you would have to modify the data. I hope that's what you meant about the question. There's also utilities, and I'm not sure if items is one of them, but there is in assisted company setup ways to copy master data from one company to another. So if you're looking to do, again, I don't know, I can't remember which modules or which tasks allow that copy, but that functionality is there as well. So hopefully that one answered your question. Good question though. Okay, so let's carry on. Custom templates. So creating a custom template is something that you could start with the generic template. So again, the generic template is the one that you export and you click on the button and it just maps the control. So that's the generic template. And then we can build out from that. So when there's an electronic format, so something that's always formatted the same way each time, we can build that format into a nice template for you. And that raw export would be your raw data, and we could map that to the main and the detail tabs for you. And we can use some of the non-data cells that are available for instruction to the user. So I kind of covered that, but I didn't quite show you what that was. So that's what I kind of want to show you so that you can kind of get to thinking of how this could work for you. So we can add balancing total fields on the import status column. We can make notes to skip records as necessary. So here are some examples of how a custom template might look. So this was an example of a GL transaction template that I did for GL transaction history. It was being populated into Sage using Data Porter, and you could definitely have a similar template to this, maybe for payroll or some outside system, and upload it to Sage on a periodic basis. So just taking a look at this one, at the top we see our freeform comments. There's a balancing field on the right here, and it's what that's looking at. It's creating a sum of the data on the detail tab, which you don't see here, but it's making sure that the batch itself is going to balance when you go to post it. So that's one check that you could do. You could do notes. So I have a note to the user saying that there's only one batch here. Use this post date and at the bottom, we can see our new tabs. So the generic template pops out the main detail log. And what we've customized here are a couple extra tabs, one being the GL data and one the GL mapping. So let's take a look at those. So this is the GL data tab. This was the data that was exported from another system, and it was pasted into the GL data tab. So I think it was columns C through K that came directly from a report. And what I did was I created formulas in columns A and L, and those ones were created with formulas to pull from the data within there. And it also created a link to the GL mapping, which I don't have an image of the GL mapping, but it was just an old GL account with the new Sage GL account. And so then from this tab, I was able to pull it into the detail tab. So a little complex and hard to walk through without showing it to you on all the tabs. But again, I just want to kind of get you guys thinking of how you can use something that you get on a periodic basis and reuse it over and over so that you can make your life simpler. And then here's an example of a more advanced template that was built from a time entry Excel workbook. The time entries are entered and pasted into the driver hours tab. And those are in turn pulled back into the main and detail tabs to create new vouchers. So this was an AP vouchers template. And once it got onto the vouchers, then it would create the record, the payment record for, or I'm sorry, the voucher record for the driver. So again, this is a pretty complex one that actually Becky wrote this one and showed it to me, and she was the one that kind of got me thinking of, okay, well, how can I use Data Porter to help our customers? And I really liked this one. It was a very good visual of how to use it, or how you can think outside of the box and make your life easier. So again, just trying to get you guys to think about how else you can use Data Porter and get more out of your Sage system, and help automate some of the manual entry or the double entry that you might be doing today. And then this is just the main tab of that same template. So this is the driver hours template, but this is the main tab. So in this case, formulas were entered to place an X in the import status to skip over unnecessary records. So we talked about that. And that formula says, okay, let's look in column I, look for anything that has a 0 or a dash through it. And if that's there, then we need to not import that record. We need to skip over it. So a really nice, almost automated way to create your vouchers. So I want to talk about common failures as well, because it's a big part of support and calls that we might get. So if you get an error during the import, it will generally record the error on the log tab. Sometimes the error is descriptive and sometimes it's not. So a common message I see is the one shown on the screen in the log tab. It says text property is read-only. That probably means nothing to most people. So it's likely that you may have actually seen a pop-up message on the screen with that same error message and you don't know what that is. So in order to work through it, because the message doesn't really make sense anyway, what we do is we look at any indicators. So if you get the message, it's likely a data issue, and you want to look for the comment indicator. So that's the Excel comment indicator. And that's usually the little red triangle on the corner of the cell. So in that case, in the case that we're showing here, the payment terms field has the indicator. That's the field that failed. And if I were to look at the payment terms on the screen, I would notice that the data shown in my cell is not an option. So it's a 10 and 30. That's not a valid option in this company. So that's why I got the error message. And then the data in the field must be the same as the data in the lookup. So payment terms, do a lookup, does 10 and 30 exist? No. Then we need to fill it in with the correct payment terms that exist for that company. So once you make that change, I want you to also note that fields with a combo box or a drop-down menu, those are generally case sensitive. So watch out for upper and lower case as well. And then another one, kind of going back to when I showed you the control and the template when the exclamation point doesn't really do anything. So a new issue that we've been seeing popping up occasionally is when the template nor the control spreadsheets respond to the exclamation point. So if you see this happening, it may be due to a recent patch, probably within Excel or Windows. And you may be able to resolve that by taking all your template data from the secondary worksheet or from the template, and then pasting that into the original control worksheet, and then closing the second workbook again. I hope you don't run into that. It seems like a lot of extra work, but we have seen it a couple times popping up. If you're still having trouble with any failures, let us know. We're happy to work with you guys through a support ticket, and just reach out to us. And then we're at Q&A time. So if you've got any questions that are burning, you can go ahead and drop that into the Q&A. So if you need to reach out.
Oh, here's one question.
Okay.
Can it be used in other, can Data Porter be used in other areas and transactions?
Yes. So I only showed the very minimal today that we could cover in an hour. I wanted to show some that I thought would be common. But yeah, Data Porter is something that you can use pretty much all over in all the modules, just watching for grids and the limitations that we discussed.
Okay, and I see another question. Can we pull all item information out of an Explorer to bring it into another company?
Yes, yes. So utilize those BIE views, those Explorer views, and pull the data out. It's already going to come out in Excel format, so that's a plus. You may need to manipulate a few things to get it back into a new company. So again, just thinking about like your classes and the upper and lower case for active, or your drop-down buttons. But yeah, definitely use Data Porter to make your life easier and pull the data out and push it back in.